Hey YouTube, how are we doing today? Today I will be going over how to fix a bad credit score as fast as possible. Before we get started, if you are new here, my name is Dylan Hippensteel and this is Hip Finance. I post videos every Monday and Friday, and the goal of this channel is to give you financial tips and tricks to help you reach your financial freedom. And just as a disclaimer, this is not financial advice, so please do your own research before listening to anything I have to say. Anyway, let's get into the reason you clicked on this video, and that is how to fix a bad credit score as soon as possible. If you're just getting started with building up your credit score, there are tons of strategies you can undertake to ensure an iconic 800 plus score. But what if it's too late and you've already messed yours up a little bit? It's not really that big of a deal, so don't beat yourself up over it. Everyone makes mistakes, but what matters is how you rectify and learn from them. Today, I'm going to show you how to fix your bad credit score as soon as possible and become financially secure. Before I get started, make sure you've liked the video and subscribed to the channel. None of these tips will work unless you do that first. Now let's get right into it. So this video is for those of you who are struggling with your financial life because you have a credit score below 680 or so. Even if it doesn't seem like a huge deal right now, it will cost you a lot of money in the long run. Wherever you go, you'll be charged with a higher interest rate. That's whether you apply for a credit card, an auto loan, or a mortgage. You'll certainly struggle with a bad score on your report. In fact, they might not even give you a loan in the first place. If you're not sure which option is worse, it's best to avoid going in that direction entirely. But guess what? You can indeed fix your score despite late payments and accounts and collections. One thing to keep in mind, however, is that none of this will happen overnight. So don't get ahead of yourself and expect it at the 800 mark within a day. At the very least, it'll take a couple weeks, if not months or even years. You have to be patient and strategic, and over time, your financial situation will certainly improve. The very first thing you do before attempting anything else, figure out what's making your score drop to begin with. Pinpoint the root cause of the problem. Run a credit report using one of the numerous freely available sites. I'd recommend Credit Karma or Mint.com, but there are others that you can certainly try out too. A quick Google search is all that it takes to point you in the right direction. Also, don't forget that you're entitled to a free credit report every year from annualcreditreport.com. Basically, just try and avoid paying for the information. Use a free service because they're just as good. Once you're done, note down all of the negative marks that are causing the drop in your score. My guess is that it's going to be one of the following reasons. Either 1, you don't have enough credit. 2, you have late payments. 3, accounts and collections. These are the worst to deal with. 4, maxed out credit utilization for those of you with a spending problem. And 5 are foreclosures and bankruptcies. These are a big yikes. These are usually the most common and obvious reasons that are causing your score to drop, so you have to strategize and make a plan to deal with them accordingly. First is late payments. As scary as that sounds, these stay on your report for up to 7 years. Taking a loan is not a bad thing at all. The problem starts when you don't have the means to pay it off. Lenders typically report late payments to credit reporting agencies once they're more than 30 days late. So let's say you forgot to make a payment on the 1st of March when it was due, but your intentions weren't bad. You had the money, but it simply slipped your mind. That's alright because you have a whole month to realize and correct your error. The late payment won't reflect on your report immediately, so even if the amount ends up being a little late, just try not to exceed the deadline. Worst case scenario is that the lending agency will charge you a bit of a late fee, but that's not the end of the world. In fact, if you ask politely and be honest about the reason the payment is late, they might even write it off. You've got nothing to lose anyway, so there's no harm in trying. On-time payment history makes up about 35% of your credit score, which is a lot. You have every reason to take it seriously. This one's a bit obvious, but the longer you take to pay off your bill, the worse it gets. So even if you missed a deadline, either by mistake or because you didn't have the money, try and deal with the situation as soon as possible instead of procrastinating and avoiding their problems entirely. Keep in mind that the longer the late payment happens, the lesser its impact will be on your credit score. Even if you did miss a deadline, it would eventually affect your credit score way less, so don't stress over it too much. Now, I've already talked about what happens when you make a payment 30 days late, but what if you're unable to return the amount even then and the duration exceeds 180 days? The account will be sent to collection and it's going to be a charge-off. Basically, a bad time for you. The obvious solution is just pay off the amount as soon as possible. But here are a few other tips that will come in handy. Reach out to the lender, be polite, and try to negotiate the terms of debt, and try to get the late payment removed from your report. The truth is, lending agencies would rather you pay something than the debt be considered a total loss. If you pay the amount and it still shows up on your credit report as a late payment, which is technically correct, you can talk it out with the lender and see if they can remove it as a courtesy. Now, they're not obligated to do this, obviously, but if you ask politely, who knows what could happen. Another tip is to look at any possible errors or inaccuracies in the report. This one definitely won't work every time, and definitely do not lie about it, but if you do happen to find any factually incorrect detail, it's worth filing a report and getting it fixed. This could boost up your credit score without costing a single penny. Next is accounts and collection. I've already told you what happens when a late payment exceeds 180 days. Lenders usually write it off as a total loss. They assume they'll never get their money back, and it reflects very poorly on your credit report. The debt is usually sold off to a third-party collection agency who then hound you over phone calls and pretty much make your life miserable. It's their problem now, and they'll try to do whatever it takes to get you to pay the money back. Again, in this scenario, I'd recommend you look for any possible errors and dispute them, because the collections that show up on your report not only look awful, but they also stay there for 7 years. If there's any mistake on the part of the debt collector, you could ask that they validate the debt and prove that it is indeed you that owes the money. You have to keep in mind that debts like these are sold multiple times over the course of 7 years. The possibility of an error is very much real, and it's yours to seize and take advantage of. Again, do not lie about anything. If it's indeed due on your end and there are no genuine errors in the report, avoid this suggestion entirely. Next is how to deal with maxed out accounts on your report. If you've hit the maximum limit on your credit utilization, it could easily be contributing to your bad credit score. Remember, credit utilization makes up about 30% of your score, and the lower it is, the more trustworthy and responsible you're seen by lenders. If you've ended up maxing out your credit, there's an easy fix for that problem, and one that can immediately impact your credit score positively. The first solution is to obviously only use a small percentage of your overall limit. As a rule of thumb, try to use under 10% of your maximum limit and pay down your credit card so you owe as little as possible. If you're unable to pay it back, I have another tip for you, but you have to be very, very careful about implementing this. Hear me out. If you don't have the money to pay it off, open up more credit. Yes, that sounds very counterintuitive at first, and as I said, you have to be careful about applying this advice to yourself. The thing is, credit bureaus don't care about how many dollars you're borrowing as credit. What matters is how much you're using compared to the total limit you're given. So if you increase your overall utilization limit, you'd be able to spend more without it reflecting negatively on your credit report. For example, let's say you have an overall limit of $1,000 and you spend over $1,000 of credit using that card. That means your credit utilization is 100%. That's not a good thing. On the other hand, let's say that you have a credit limit of $10,000 and you spend the same $1,000. Your credit card utilization will only be 10%. That would drastically improve your credit score, and you don't have to pay more than what you were going to anyway. This advice certainly doesn't apply if you have a spending problem and you think you'll end up using all the new credit you get. If that's the case, there's no solution other than to pay down your credit card as soon as possible. Last is bankruptcy and foreclosures. This one might be the most challenging to deal with, not only because there are very few ways to work around it, but also because it stays on your report for 7 to 10 years. You can try and look for errors, which are highly possible. If your lender is not in business anymore, try and dispute and get the bankruptcy and foreclosure removed from your report. But in all honesty, if the claims are true, there is very little you can do to prevent it from reflecting on your statement. But I'd highly recommend working around it by improving everything else on your report. So even if bankruptcy and foreclosures are causing the score to drop, they're the only real causes and nothing else. That's it for today's video, and I really hope all the suggestions I provided were helpful and that you found this video informative. Make sure to like the video, drop a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications so you're always notified when I upload more content. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.